Welcome to the 2022 Judges Forum for the Oregon Wine Competition. My name is Ashley Myers, and I will be your moderator this evening. Before we get started, we would like to thank our Oregon Wine Competition presenting sponsor, Rogue Pacific Lumber. Thank you so much, everyone. This year, for the Oregon Wine Competition, more than 300 wines were submitted. This is a top regional competition taking place each July for one weekend. A world-renowned panel of wine experts carefully evaluates these wines double-blind over 2 days. Medal-winning wines are celebrated and served in August at the Oregon Wine Experience, a premier charitable culinary event benefiting children's health care for the thousands of wine enthusiasts who attend. Here with me this evening are the 2022 judges, and I would love for them to introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Susan.
Hi, my name is Susan Lin, and I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I worked for a fine wine retailer boutique called Belmont Wine Exchange, and I also do consulting on wine and music performing arts experiences. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And hi, I'm Eric Heemer. I'm from South Florida, and I work for Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. I'm in charge of education nationally, and I'm a Master of Wine and Master Sommelier, and really happy to be here for this.
Hi, my name is Peg Sanfilippo. I split my time between Wisconsin and Florida. I'm a wine journalist, and I was fortunate enough to be at this competition last year as well. It's been great to see everyone again.
I'm Josh Reynolds. I write for Vinous, which is a wine, criticism magazine. So I'm a critic. Covers a lot of part of the critical from around the world. And Oregon is a region that I've covered for about 16 years. And this is my first time to actually participate in this event. And I was really pleased to be invited, honored, frankly. And it's an area that's attracting an awful lot of attention from our subscribers and for the business in general. So it's important for me to be here and be sort of a witness, let's say, to what's happening, because it's a really exciting area, which I saw definitely over the last 4 days that I've been here. And it's been a real pleasure, especially around a lot of people who know a lot more about it than I do. So it's a learning experience, and it's been wonderful.
Hi, my name is Virginia Phillip. I'm the wine director and master sommelier for the Breakers in Palm Beach, Florida, which is a large resort. We have 10 restaurants, so we write 15 wine lists with a team of 7 sommeliers, and in addition, I own my own wine store. So we do education and sell spirits and wine with a team of 5 sommeliers.
You must
Glad
be
to be
bored.
here. I get very bored.
A lot of time on our hands.
Yeah.
All right. I'm Bianca Godwin. I'm a wine educator from Los Angeles, California, and this is my second year actually participating in the Oregon Wine Experience as a judge, and I am very happy to be here.
And we're also happy to have you.
I forgot to mention that I'm a Master of
I was
Wine.
going to say, Susan forgot. She's a fairly
Apologies.
newly minted Master of Wine. So, yeah, that's kind of an important piece.
I was wondering when you're going to get around to that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here so much. It really is an honor to work with you. I had the pleasure of pouring wine sort of behind the scenes for the judges all weekend, and to know that they're giving us their time and their skills to help make sure that we have a competition with integrity is really phenomenal. So thank you all so much. I have some questions for you. I would like to start with climate and terroir. Was there anything that you noticed about the climate and terroir in Oregon that really stood out for you, that you were able to see through the wines in the competition this year?
Just any of us?
Any of you, yes, please.
Go ahead, Susan. You're the newest MW.
Well, one of the things that really struck me was the fact that there were so many different grape varieties that can be grown in one area, just in the same estate. 17 varieties, 25 varieties, very different styles. Whites, reds, and rosé wines can be made from a very, very small area. And I just thought that was really, really incredible. And the attention to detail that the winemakers take, that create these really unique styles just from that terroir alone, and really, really looking at the different microclimates and the little, the different elevations, the different altitudes, and the soil types. And being able to do something really unique with that I think is a wonderful, wonderful source of variety and inspiration. That's
Really, it's very eye-opening. I think when you come out here, most people are familiar with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Pinot Gris, the primary grape varieties when you think about Oregon. But when you look at the stats, you realize there's 72 different grape varieties planted in the state. You know, it makes you realize there's a lot more than just Willamette Valley. And I think for me that was really interesting to come down and taste these, you know, Bordeaux blends and taste Barbera and Tempranillo and Sangiovese and all these grapes that, you know, a lot of people don't realize are grown here. And here in southern Oregon, where we're based right now, it's, you know, the climate's a little bit warmer, but there are some pockets of cool climate areas at higher elevation where they can grow grapes like Gruner Veltliner, for example, and Riesling. So there's a lot more diversity than people realize, I think, about Oregon and Oregon's wines and terroirs.
And were there any particular varietals that stood out, like that were really big for you?
I would say the Albarino that's coming from, especially the Umpqua Valley, is fantastic. I mean, it's really stellar. I think that needs to be really more well addressed because, again, as both Susan and Eric alluded to, when people hear Oregon, they completely think of Pinot, Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, and they forget about all the other great things that are going on in here, especially in the southern portion of Oregon. And we found some really amazing Tempranillo, as Eric alluded to, but the Syrah, wow, was pretty awesome.
And Malbec too, right?
Malbec too, so watch out, northern areas.
Yeah, well, I think that like the Willamette Valley, in a lot of ways, is at cruising speed, and they hit it a while ago. I mean, you have third-generation winemakers coming in there, people like Jimmy Marsh. Jason Lett has children who will probably be coming in. So you're literally moving into the third generation up there. And here, it's really fascinating because it's almost like watching a child grow up in a way. And I think, you know, if you depends on how you were raised as a child or how you raise a child, this is almost like a Montessori region. It's like learn to do whatever, and you'll figure it out. And I think you're seeing that here. And it's starting to mature. I think certain varieties are starting to gel. I mean, for me, Malbec was an eye-opener. It's not my favorite variety. Tempranillo, I've long thought was pretty interesting here. Albarino has been really cool. But, I mean, let's be honest. Down here, you are at least a generation or two generations, in a lot of ways, behind Willamette Valley, where you had plantings in the early 60s, like when I was born, for God's sake, and I'm old. It's really interesting for me to come down here and watch this area grow, because I think as I travel into a lot of places around the world, a lot of regions, and it's really interesting to see, again, the baby steps, which then, eventually, you start off crawling and eventually you run. And you're starting to see that in a lot of instances here.
I find that's what's so exciting about Southern Oregon is that it, because OWE is having this competition, all of us are able to come and really get educated on a region that typically is not showcased. And so it is a big eye-opener for all of us. And in the end, I think we'll all go home considering Oregon wine in the southern part a big deal in our portfolios or in our education, but we'll speak of it more.
Yeah,
So
indeed.
At one point it was mentioned that the Willamette was kind of at cruising speed. Would you say, how do you feel about the overall winemaking quality for the wines, whether they were from the northern or southern region? How did you feel about that?
I mean, I guess I'll take that since I brought it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always said that for a region to really develop, let's say, like to garner attention, garner respect, which could either mean the press or presence on wine lists, with wholesalers, whatever you want to say, you have to have a critical mass of producers that are doing serious work. And one of the easiest ways to start doing serious work, frankly, is to be embarrassed. To have your neighbor or your classmate start doing something better than you, and you go home and you say, "Damn it, I gotta try harder." And when you get enough people doing that, it's the old. I mean, it's such a cliche, but I'm good at cliches. It's the rising tides and boats, and that happens. And frankly, it's still happening here. Where you look at Willamette. I mean, Willamette Valley is one of the greatest regions for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in the world. I don't even want to use the B word in France. It's just, they got there, 15 years ago. So, and if anything, they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's no reason, especially when you come here and you see the people who are serious, that can't happen here, and it is happening. But it's, again, I think we all look at life in sort of, or I look at life in a fatal way. I won't be here to see it. I hope my daughters are able to see it, but it takes a lot of time, right? I mean, I think the pioneers of the Willamette Valley aren't here to see what they've wrought, but it's happened. And I don't see any reason why it can't happen here. Again, based on we've seen, these are the seeds. I mean, we're seeing the beginning of what's happening.
And does anyone have suggestions on how a winery can get more press and exposure in the media to help us catch on to that tide? And that, I think that includes small producers in the entirety of Oregon, not just in Southern Oregon. Are there any suggestions?
It's like an Eric question because he's in distribution.
Oh, no, don't throw this one on me. It's a tough question. I think you just have to consistently and constantly promote in whatever fashion that you can. It's very, very difficult to get national distribution when you're a relatively unknown outside of the region, producer. It can be very difficult, but just keep at it, keep trying, keep making the best wine that you can possibly make, and enter competitions like this one. Get medals. If you're not getting medals, find out why, and tweak it a little bit and make better wine so that you are consistently getting medals, and eventually, it'll catch on. If you look 20 years ago at places like the Finger Lakes in New York, nobody outside of upstate New York was familiar with the Finger Lakes. Now you can find Finger Lakes regions wines in Florida and Chicago, throughout the East Coast. So it'll happen. You just got to keep at it. I mean, it's still pretty early innings here, but I think the potential's here. I think the learning curve is a good one, and I was really surprised at the uniformly good to very good to excellent quality of the wines coming out of these appellations down here. So just keep pushing, keep making great wine, keep talking it up, keep inviting people out. We've got a whole bunch of people here that go back to their markets and say, wow, you wouldn't believe the great stuff that they're doing in Oregon, not just Willamette Valley. I mean, we all are pretty well versed on that, but we're learning more about the sub-AVAs now, the Willamette Valley, and there's new AVAs coming along all the time. And so all of that education, it will eventually start to gel, and I think people will realize that world-class wines are made here in Southern Oregon.
You can start small too.
I was just going to say, as a buyer, I've already found 3 wines that I would like.
Right?
So if Eric
Wonderful.
won't bring them in, I'll find someone to clear them, and I'll get a pallet and pour it by the glass in one of our restaurants and say, hey, this wine is smoking good. And the quality to ratio value, I think, is just way above and beyond what I think you can find from domestic product.
Really?
Yeah, and some of the categories, absolutely 100%.
But also from a press and media standpoint, I realize when you're in a smaller winery, you wear a lot of hats anyway. But consistency. I find that I'll hear from wineries once a year, twice a year. No, if you want to stay in front of me and you want me to consider you in an article, I need to hear from you. What are you doing that's different? What are you doing that's new? What are people saying about what you're doing? Communication, bottom line. And emails, it doesn't have to take you a ton of time, but communication, and don't be afraid to toot your own horn. Let people know what you're doing.
Right.
I think starting small in terms of distribution can be really great too. Start locally, because maybe you don't even have that production that to go nationwide, and that's okay. So, and I know that during the pandemic too, a lot more there's been consolidation, but there's also been fragmentation to serve more interests and and I think and needs. And I think if you can start locally, and there are distributors who are focusing on that, you can start in your local market. You can gain traction on restaurant wine lists or wine bars, and it can just go from there. And you can see if you want to increase your production or not, and start getting really cult wine status. It can happen.
Yeah, it has happened.
I did have a follow-up question. If I am a small or medium-sized winery looking for a distributor, and this is specifically for Eric, what would a distributor expect from me? What are my guidelines? What should I expect from them?
It's a good question, and I get asked that question quite often. And really, the key is have a business plan. You know, be very sure that you know what you want to do, how much wine you have to sell in a given market. You know what your pricing plan is, POS. You know, anything that would make me say, okay, I'm going to sit up and take notice and pay attention to this. Samples, current samples, making sure all your pricing is accurate. Because we get at Southern Glazers, we get thousands of samples, on a yearly basis, and it's difficult. You want to try to, do the best you can for everyone, but you can only do so much. So, make sure that you have a really long-term plan, or at least the next couple of years. Know how much you're going to make, know what your increases are going to be. Let the distributor know what you expect from them, and that's a good first step.
I would like to switch a little bit more to wine specifics, if we could, too, just about your experience in the competition. Tell me, sparkling wine is one of my favorites. Tell me what your impressions were of the sparkling wines entered into the competition this year.
I thought it was a mixed bag.
Okay, tell me why.
There were a number of wines that definitely seemed like afterthoughts.
Interesting.
Blends of disparate varieties, which I kind of get. Maybe they do well at the cellar door or the tasting room, but many of them still are sweet. They have residual sugar, or there are some really, really good ones going on, but it's still a really young industry. It's really just beginning, and unfortunately for the market, the most well-known ones from Oregon are quite expensive, and again, mostly from Willamette. You have ones up there that are pushing $100, which is pretty nervy. But they're able to sell to, I guess, certain tourists, and the production's small enough. That's a very, very tough wine to make, a tough style of wine to make. And I think it's my impression with wineries that do it is that they pretty much need to be all in. It can't be an afterthought. You really need to be a very good winemaker. There's blending. There's an awful lot of care going on until it finally gets released into the market, and it can't be an afterthought at all. A number of people do it, but I'll be honest, I see way too many wines, not just here, but even, let's say, outside of Champagne. I hate to throw the big C word out, and the other C, little C, Cava. But the problem is that a lot of places that are doing sparkling wine, to me, they're clearly afterthoughts. It's a big commitment. It's a big financial commitment. The fruit needs to be harvested specifically for that. It can't be just leftover. It's a tough task.
Yeah.
Especially to compete in the market with the two big C's.
At the same time, I think that I was really impressed by some of the really exploratory and kind of gutsy quality of some of these blends, and I really think that it's wonderful that people are trying to make great sparkling wines, because not everyone can afford those $100 bottles that Josh was speaking of. There can be affordability and just pleasure at all different sorts of price points, all different kinds of enjoyment cases, right? And so I think there could be possibilities, especially if you're looking at a target audience and knowing who you're going to make that wine for. And maybe you're making that wine for you to begin with, and you start from there, and then you perfect that for what you see, but also have an idea of, who you want to be making it for. And so that will help shape that and the quality of what you want to do. But I think it's really fun. There were I was really excited by some of these wines.
I just want to jump in real quick with this. One of the things I see as a writer, if I get submitted samples, and you still see it here, you still see it in a lot of places in the world, is when you get a sparkling wine and you tear off the capsule, tear off the foil, and you've got this generic silver capsule, not even branded with the name of the winery. Instantly you say, this is an afterthought. They haven't even made it. And then you open the cork, and the cork is this generic, not great cork, and you just realize, to me, it says afterthought, and stuff to do with leftover juice. And it sells because it's sparkling, and this is where it's like a tasting room situation. It's not serious. I'm sorry. It's just, it looks like you can't make the commitment even to get a proper capsule with a brand on it. And I'm also very suspicious of non-vintage stuff. generally.
Why?
Because again, it's leftover stuff.
Yeah, but 85%, 90% of production champagne is non-vintage, right?
But they're also working with, say, 6 or 7 vintages that are in stock that they then blend together and for a second fermentation.
But there are producers here in Oregon that have reserve cellars too that do the exact same thing. So
But their reserves are going to be limited to something like 2 or 3 years.
not everybody.
Well, okay, if you're talking about the high-end guys.
We're
like yours.
we are, but
Yeah.
you know, you mentioned $100 bottles. It's not that I want to disagree with you. There's a lot of non-vintage sparkling wine from Oregon that's $30 retail, which is right in line with California and other New World countries. So I have to disagree slightly. And there are some producers, without naming names, we all know who they are, that do specialize in world-class traditional method sparkling wine. And I like what Susan said about that spirit of experimentation. We tasted a sparkling Grenache today. We tasted sparkling Gamay Noir. I mean, how many people are doing that, you know, and where else in the world? So it's kind of interesting to see that. And I take
Was
your
it meant
point.
to be sparkling?
Well, you have to ask the winemaker, Josh.
There were different styles. I get it, there's a mixed bag, and there were some grape varieties that clearly did not work well together, and I was kind of a little perplexed, like, okay, why did they put these 2 grape varieties together, or why did they put these 3? But they were not working in a, you know, method champenoise style. They were working in a prosecco or you know, just a really easygoing style, and I appreciated those wines because sometimes you just don't want a serious bubbly. You just want something fun and crack it open and drink it and don't worry about it.
Yep.
And I think that's definitely in alignment with our wine culture in this area. Obviously, we do have some really serious producers, but I think there's very much enjoyment that we receive from the production and consumption of these products, and that joyful energy, I think, is definitely conveyed in some of our sparklers for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
time and a place. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. The largest number of entries were in the Pinot Noir category. That's not terribly unusual for us, and we've talked a lot about, you know, the Pinot perception in Oregon. How did you feel about the quality and consumer appeal of the wines that were entered into the competition for the domestic market?
Just some Pinot Noir or any variety?
The question is geared toward Pinot Noir, but if there's something else that speaks to you, then I think we take that too.
You're going to do Syrah.
Yeah, talk about the Syrah. That was really a standout for you.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other, listen, Oregon makes some of the best Pinot Noir on the planet, right? I mean, let's just get that out of the way and say that that's how it is. But what people didn't realize, and what I'm also coming to realize, is that their Syrah is, kick ass. It was really good. There were a lot of great other wines like the Barberas and the Dolcettos that were eye-opening for me. So I think there's a great future.
Don't forget the rosés.
Don't forget the rosés. So, I mean, there's a lot to look forward to outside of the Pinot Noir camp. So, and it's you know, we don't want to. Remember how Argentina got labeled for Malbec, and it's very difficult for people to see beyond Malbec in Argentina. I would hate to see Oregon get boxed into the, you know, Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay. There's more to offer here.
Yeah, and that question came up today. Well, is there a signature grape variety for Southern Oregon? And the answer is no, not really. So, and why should there be? Because you don't want to be boxed into one variety. You know.
That's what I was saying about the baby steps.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's a work in progress, which is what's so interesting about it.
But do you think that Southern Oregon will identify a specific variety that they stick to? I see Southern Oregon kind of as cowboys.
Well, yeah, but eventually, cowboy has to settle down.
You know,
As they used to say in
Maybe,
the Old West,
I don't know.
like an old Clint Eastwood kind of.
I know
theme,
some
you know?
winemakers that would probably
You meet
tell
Sandra
you that,
Rock and you
like,
settle down.
you know, over my dead body, will you see me settle on just? I don't want to do it.
Well, your body will be dead. I think we're about 2 generations away from it.
Right.
But that's just how long it takes to, you know, for a region to, you know, either get identified as something or to perform at a certain level. And who knows? But that's to me, that's the fun part of it, is seeing what it is. And I mean, Albarino, I think, is starting to hit. I think we all kind of agree on that. Syrah, definitely is starting to hit. Grenache, you know, which is, you know, it's like, well, I say you got a Spanish variety, you got a couple Southern Rhone varieties, but we saw some really good Pinots. I mean, who knows?
Well, let's talk a little bit about we're not the only ones, a couple, 3 generations down the road in Southern Oregon that might be switching. Let's talk about what's going to happen with climate change and fire damage.
Good point.
I mean, both of those things are going to highly affect Pinot Noir production in both regions. Tell me, do you have any feelings about that?
Well, every region in the world.
Every region in the
Every
world,
cool,
yeah.
but every
absolutely.
cool climate region is having to to deal with this.
Consider that, yeah.
There was a great Touriga Nacional in the lineup.
Yes.
which is- And just, that's a grape that is being widely adopted in so many different parts of the world. I mean, in Bordeaux, right? One of the new 6 varieties that were approved, right? In limited quantities, of course. But I think that's really exciting that there are so many different grape varieties being considered here in Southern Oregon, and I hope that, to echo something that was said earlier about, when we were discussing Willamette, and that the experimentation and that cowboy spirit of Southern Oregon can really, really help inspire and, kind of inject some more inspiration for the next step for Willamette Valley, right? As things change, and as to maybe snap out of the cruise control for some, and
Right.
have some injection of new inspiration. So I think that might be a really great compliment, from Southern Oregon to Northern Oregon and back and forth. That then it'll be even a bigger tide for more boats to go back
Right.
to Josh's.
Yeah, no, it's true. If you look up north, but if you look at a lot of, let's say, the northern regions around the world, they're all starting to, adjust. Out of, nobody was talking about Pinot Noir in Germany, to speak of. Other like southern Germany maybe, but now, Spätburgunder, they don't even call it Spätburgunder anymore. It's Pinot Noir.
Oh, really?
And and look at sparkling wine in England. It's going up. You've got a lot of people under the radar, under the law, working with Grenache in the Northern Rhone, which is not easy to do because you're on granite, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, they're all having to kind of adjust to.
Yeah. In other words, site selection is going to be really, really important.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
And higher elevations, better exposure, clones and plant material that can,
Varieties.
varieties and clonal selection is going to be really, really important to deal with some of these problems. And there's a silver lining for some people, like Southern England, as Josh mentioned, is now producing really top quality sparkling wine.
Superb wines.
And it made it to 60 minutes.
Yeah, there you go. Well, but if you talk to winemakers around the world, people are planning ahead. The smart ones anyway. They're thinking, 100 years down the road, is it going to be too warm at this site, at this elevation, to grow these grape varieties I'm growing? So I'm investing in land that's another 100 meters higher in elevation. And I think you're going to see that in the Pacific Northwest too. So those higher elevations, those areas that are cooled by wind tunnels from the ocean, that have better breeze and more uniform, marine influence, that would be even more important than they are now.
Well, we've been talking a lot over the last 4 or 5 days about the diurnal shifts here.
Right.
And the cold nights, which is obviously a way to extend the growing seasons, because now harvesting has been happening 4 to 6 weeks ahead of traditional schedules, and you get things like phenolic ripeness. Is it really ready to ripe? The sugar levels are like this, but what are you going to get out of it? And so down here, you have these huge shifts.
Right. We
And-
learned, I think it was near 40 degrees difference.
Exactly.
For, right?
Yeah. Which is really important, especially for, let's call it the northern varieties like Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Dolcetto, things from northern Italy, from northern France. They need that.
Right.
They need that.
I would like to touch back for a moment about smoke exposure. This has been something that's been really challenging for winemakers the past 3 or 4 years in Oregon. Was that a factor in the competition this year? Did you notice any wines that had obvious smoke exposure? Did it affect any of them, or your perception of any of them?
I don't know that there were that many 2020s actually entered. Did you say?
We did. We have
2019 would have
We're
also been a
520,
factor.
520, 20 Pinots.
Yes.
I'm not sure which they were. We'll find out tomorrow.
Right.
They were affected,
They were affected.
definitely.
Did you find that the winemakers were successful in manipulating the wines to the point where it was integrated, or was it?
We talked about
Unpleasant.
this. And, there was one that was clearly filtered to hell and back,
Right.
like probably through the finest membrane that God created.
Okay. And I would assume that
And the
that
color,
produced a wine that
it was a
was not
2020, it
favorable.
had the color of an 8-year-old wine. But
Got it.
and then others, you wonder, like, did they leave residual sugar? And we've talked about this a lot going around. I think a lot of people are they're flying by the seat of their pants. This is something they've never really had to deal with. So a lot of people are trying whatever they can. My God, can you imagine you make one product and you got one shot a year? taking a hit is like that is devastating. It's devastating. So
But
you
it's also
try.
the skin contact you had too, right?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
But then, like the after things, it's still. I mean, I see papers, 2 or 3 weeks, or papers, whatever, and people are, what do we do? I mean, it's part of the learning process, unfortunately. What do they do? A lot of people, as you know, just didn't make any wine. A lot of people didn't harvest fruit at all. They just dropped it. A lot of people sold it off made second or third labels. Maybe if you drink it early enough, you're not going to notice it.
I was just going to mention, before acid hydrolysis occurs, like drink now or forever hold your peace.
Or it's like, or just like, Pabst Blue Ribbon tastes amazing when it's about 34 degrees. Just don't let it get warm. And I think that's the thing with this. And unfortunately, people are either going to have to eat it. And that's tough to say to somebody, especially a small producer, even a big producer. I mean, what do you say? Like, no, don't worry about it. Just sell it cheap. Like, well, it's easy for you to say. I've got X number of employees. I got mouths to feed. I got rent to pay. It's a nightmare.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to say that when I first encountered smoke exposure on a wine, especially from this region, before it became a little more prevalent in this area, I thought of it as a really lovely way to teach someone about terroir. It is an environmental impact that you can't ignore. We can talk about soil and sunshine and diurnal shifts all day long. That is so much harder to identify for a new wine drinker than smoke. Can you sense the smoke on this? Yes. This wine was exposed to smoke. I've always thought that was kind of an interesting way to look at the whole process. If it can be managed appropriately, it is a part of our world. We can't fully extract it from our experience. And I'm not saying that wine with smoke exposure should necessarily be considered beneficial, or that should be a piece of terroir. But I've always thought it was kind of an interesting facet.
That's
But I don't want to get paid I don't want to pay money to get beaten up. If I can buy the 19 or the 18 or the 21 for the same price or even a little bit more, which is clearly better. I mean, I can say it as a science experiment.
But I guess then I would challenge you. Is it clearly better simply because
Yes.
it doesn't have any
Absolutely,
evidence?
it is. Line them up. Line them up. There's no question.
Okay.
One tastes like an ashtray, and one tastes like fruit. And and it's like, fine, if you want to make that, charge the appropriate price. I get the romance of it. I mean, I worked in Burgundy for almost 2 years,
That was a fairly romantic.
which is a cold,
comment.
which is cold, and they'd say, well, the 86 should sell for the same price as the 85. No, you can't go into the market like that.
Right.
85 was clearly better. And that was, honestly, that's one of the things that's given a lot of people in the wine business a bad reputation, is because they try to sell flawed, or either flawed wines or weaker vintages as something special. It's what happened with Bordeaux with 82 versus 81 and 83. I mean, I think a lot of us here know what we're talking about. And it gives the wine business a bad reputation.
But Australia's been working with fires for decades, right? So I would imagine that some of the winemakers here maybe are in communication with them in Australia to
A
find
lot.
out.
They are.
Yeah,
They
should
are.
Absolutely. I'm sure they are, and they should be. So I'm
Yeah.
sure there's
California for sure. Too.
exactly.
Well, they went to Australia. Was actually where they had to send. There was a whole thing with was it AS? Or was it the lab ATS?
ATS, yeah.
Got so overwhelmed with samples, mostly from Oregon. The people from Oregon started sending their samples to Australia, which is obviously a different client, a different time of year. That's where they got their testing done, and they're good at it. I mean, they're not just good at it; they're probably the masters at it.
Yeah, the challenge is pardon me.
But the thing is, flaws happen, and I think the thing with 2020 is, and we've been waiting for this to happen in a lot of ways. So what's happened to me, that's like when the marketing department starts taking over the winemaking department, and they're like, okay, I got to find a way to spin this, and at a certain point, you just have to say, no, it was a disaster, and here's what happened, and we're gonna have to eat it. And if you spin it, or you try to spin it in a weird direction.
In a romantic way, you mean?
Well, okay, wait, no, that's good. That's good. And you said your dead body, your body will be dead long after mine is, but it's a good way to wreck your reputation. And I see it in a lot of places, not just here, but in California and other vintages where this happened. And when you see a lot of the people with the best reputations, hard-earned, decades, when they say this vintage sucked, we couldn't make wine. If you're the guy, the outlier, who's just like, oh no, I got the magic vineyard where it didn't happen, and like, well, wait a minute, the 15 top guys in the area said no, and you're saying yes, you better be right.
I will say that there have been stories, and Susan, I would love to hear what you had to say on this subject also, but we did have a number of wineries who had contracts with smoke-affected vineyards who held onto those contracts to honor their neighbors and to keep people afloat. And that, I think, for all of Oregon, especially in a time of stress and concern and disaster, as you put it, was a huge boon to our winemaking culture as a whole. And so as much as I agree with you from a global perspective that, being able to call a vintage and just say, this might not work out for us, I think also the Oregon wine community banding together has become, I think, a part of our identity.
It's a part of your lore, and I know exactly what you're talking about, because there was a huge producer who bailed. I'm not going to say who.
And it was scarring, I think, for our region.
But then you had a lot of your colleagues up north who took it in, and they made, I think it was like an $18 or $20 wine, and sold it. I think we all knew who we were talking about.
Yeah.
And that outfit, who was better equipped to handle a hit like that than anybody, didn't. And I think we all knew who we were talking about, and I think they deserve to be shunned because they left a lot of small people hanging. They screwed a lot of people. Sorry, I know this is live, but it's true. No, it's true. It's true. And they deserve to be shunned. And I don't even know if they're making wine here anymore.
I commend all of our winery partners who did stand together.
Yep.
And really support each other through these past
That was
years
very
that have
cool.
been really challenging.
It was
So
very cool.
I think it really speaks to their spirit.
Yep. You remember that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Nice, I'm out of line. I'm sure I am. But
We're going to totally shift gears. This is on the list. Labeling has been a conversation at the Oregon Wine Competition for years. Now, you were only exposed to a small number of the bottles, so almost the double golds. We have had comments from judges in the past that labeling is a huge factor, and if you're not going to up your game in labeling, you're not going to up your game in sales. Talk to us about how important labeling is.
I think the retailer in the group could address that question pretty well.
That'd be lovely.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely there's some work to be done in labeling for sure. I mean, I think some of the basics can be appreciated, but at the same time, anything that's eye-catching or unique on the label, we saw some really excellent examples of very good labeling and packaging, but then we saw some, mediocre ones that, quite honestly, as a female, not that I'm looking at labels because I just don't, but anyway, if you're a consumer, you're going to definitely, that attention will be drawn to a shelf for sure. So I think more colors, a little more gloss on some of the labels would be very much appreciated, and it is sort of a Western cowboy type of look on some of the labels.
And that was favorable or unfavorable?
I think for me, when you there needs to be a sort of sophistication because the wines are calling for sophistication. I think from my palate today, what I experienced, we had an Albarino Reserve the other day. It was really outstanding, and that labeling was Abbasella, and their labeling I thought was stellar.
Yeah.
But I think that when you look at a car, it's all about the packaging, right? Who cares what's under the engine sometimes? You got to get it off the shelf. So yeah, I think they could use some labeling. Not everyone.
But can I also just add that I like the fact that especially telling even a minimal amount of someone's story is real important. So I really, and I advise people, if there's something on the label besides just the things that they absolutely have to have on there, there's a little information about the winery and what their thoughts are and their philosophy. I think that's just a plus too if there's room.
Yeah, how many people did we meet this weekend whose labeling was created by a husband-wife partnership or how they met in the wine industry? That was very cool. And to tell that story on the back of the label or as they were talking to us about that relationship will definitely stick with us. And we can tell that story again to a consumer or a client or anyone we're selling it to. That's huge.
I also think that it's important to not necessarily mirror each other when it comes to labels, because there's a lot of similarities between, different wineries and their labels, and kind of they don't stand out as independent. You just kind of assume, you know, that they're all coming from the same place because they all look like X, Y, or Z, you know? And so I think, you know, to make yourself stand out in a elevated kind of way would help.
Stay away from the animals, right? We don't want to.
Also, don't hire your daughter who went to art school. I've always learned that's usually a bad one. Like, you look
there's
at
a
the label and you say,
story behind
wow,
that.
you changed the label. And you're like, yeah, my daughter, she graduated from art school. And you're like, yeah, okay. It's like, you get a little nepotism thing going on.
Right.
Spin it romantically, but that's when the marketing team can come in.
Yeah, well, it's like, she needed a job.
So tell the story, but make sure it's the right story.
Yeah.
I love it. This is kind of an interesting segue, but I think very helpful for some of our smaller wineries. Which type or types of social media should a winery who has limited staff focus on to attract more customers and winery visitors? We're talking about story, so maybe we're telling it there. What would you recommend? What really stands out for you?
Tinder and Grindr?
Hey now, hey now.
Instagram for sure.
Obviously.
Yeah, definitely the reels are very important.
For the visual aspect.
Yeah, I mean, just, you know, that's the opportunity for you to position your wine and show it in a way that you would imagine, like, this is not just the wine, this is with the label together, this is our story, this is perhaps, you know, the aspirational lifestyle or that moment, right? And then you get people say, like, wow, they remember the feeling of that moment, they get to that image. So I think, you know, strong images, you know, that people will remember along with that label that it conveys the quality and the story of your wine and your raison d'etre, so to speak. And, you know, just not only just, you know, images of the hand holding the ball in the sky, like try to do something that tells a little bit more, that enhances that story. And I think that will have some good impact.
TikTok too is huge. I mean, I know it's hard to believe, but you know, there's a lot of 21 is, you know, 21 is TikTok, right? So TikTok has huge amount of followers, and if we look at some of the most successful business operators who are young, billionaires at the moment, even multimillionaires, right? There, it's TikTok.
So TikTok and Instagram for certain demographics, for sure. What if my target demographic, because maybe my bottles are higher priced, is actually someone with a little more disposable income?
They're on
still focus
Instagram
that?
and TikTok.
Yeah.
They're there too.
I love
mean,
it.
Literally, you just have to give the consumer something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
You know, you have to keep them engaged. You know, so every time they pop up, it's this beautiful image that brings you back to that place or that bottle of wine you've had from them. And you want to continue to follow them, and not only follow them, but go visit and tell your friends, and you see this bottle.
And invite them. I mean, invite them and to feel like there's a sense of community. You know, and involving people that are at your winery, and you know, having them post at your winery, and you know, any events, again, coming back to events, any events coming up in your winery, you know, do some reels, make it really, you know, wow, I really want to be there.
Well, okay, that's a good question.
Engage.
Videos or shots? I think videos is probably.
Well,
They've moved more into the video.
right.
I mean, reels. I know the things like that. Instagram has
reels.
definitely moved towards reels.
It's like 3 seconds, people can hardly even look at you.
We're all in the wine business,
Yeah.
right? So we're used to, we think, you know, that wine is God, but for a lot of people, there's so many alternative options. You were talking
It's not
spirits, we're talking
Weed.
sodas
don't
with
know it.
marijuana in it. these
Cannabis
days. I mean,
now,
there's
right?
other things
Right.
that people are interested in. So I think
Right.
you really have to go outside the box and think about the younger demographic. For
Yes,
sure.
especially if you want to get Gen Z interested, because they're drinking lots of things, but wine isn't higher on the priority list. So it's really important to keep drawing that new generation in and get them interested. And if social media is the way to do it, then you should be in the social media business.
Yeah. And Peg, I loved your point too about inviting people who visit your winery to post for you, because then if you do have limited staff or you're looking at, you know, not being able to hire someone to do this full time, which most of us can't do, having people who visit you repost and tag and invite others to join you, I think is a great way to expand that. I had one other question, and then I would love to open it up to anything else you wanted to say. Were there any unique styles of winemaking that you were able to identify that you were just totally surprised were happening in this area? And by this area, I mean all of Oregon. Like, did you try a Pinot that was kind of odd or?
Well, I mean, I've just tasted about 1,000 Oregon wines from around the country over the last few months, and so it wasn't really a surprise for me, but I think it could have been a surprise for other people. Are the rosés,
Okay.
and I think that rosés, whether they be, the Pinot Noirs from the north, frankly, the Grenache and the Rhone blends from here are the real shockers, because a lot of the rosés from down here are actually brighter and fresher and more racy than the Pinot Noirs from the north. So I don't know if it's a white wine influence or exactly what's going on, but I do think that Oregon in general, north to south, is really getting a handle on bright, racy, fresh, spicy rosés. I mean, we had a flight of 10 or 11 or something, and every one of them was a pale color, and I don't think it was like a cheating, color stripped, science wine. They were bright, they were fresh, they were brisk, and they were as good as any example of New World rosés I've seen, and better than a hell of a lot of them from Europe, frankly.
Love it.
I wish people would realize that. I mean,
Yeah.
And rosé is becoming a more serious category. It's becoming more of a year-round category, for good reason. We tasted a ton. I mean, we tasted like 11, and 10 of them were silver.
Yeah, a lot of medal winners.
Yeah.
And what did we drink last night when we went out to dinner? We could have drunk
We
anything
ordered
at all, right?
We ordered 2 bottles of rosé, and they were gone in about 20 minutes.
Yeah, and they were from Southern Oregon. They were GSM blends, and they were absolutely delicious. Moderate alcohol, crisp acidity, really bright, fresh fruit, really clean, well made, with a nice energy and minerality about it that was just it's totally enjoyable. Great wines.
I thought there were some fun sparkling ones too, fun blends that you wouldn't normally think of, especially not in the United States, or you would think of this area. So I was like, wow, that's really fun. And it's, again, we can take it away, not just like we need to have really lees aged, types of classic, Chardonnay type wines or the champagne based style wines, but to have more aromatic varieties, it's just really, really fun to have those different options. And then maybe just a hint of residual sugar if it's well integrated, it's really wonderful. Or even going gutsy on some of these and going bone dry,
Right.
and seeing how that stands up to that. And I thought that was really fun.
Yeah.
It was really great to see the diversity of styles and the types of grape varieties to put together. And there were some that really worked well, and I would definitely want to get a couple of bottles just to enjoy my own this summer.
There was one sparkling wine we had that I think it was the record for most varieties in it. 9 different varieties in this one
my
sparkling
goodness.
wine we had today. Red and white.
After that, what are we going to do with all these grapes? Oh, sparkling wine.
But if it works, it works. But if it works,
And it was not everybody's
results don't equal ambition.
Sorry. The only thing I would say about rosé is that, there is a typicity of style, at least on the East Coast, that we are looking for, and unfortunately is that light Côte de Provence. We don't mind going slightly darker, but it is refreshing to see some of these other styles coming out of Oregon in particular, especially in the South, as everyone's alluding to. So I think you have to make a wine that you love and enjoy as a winemaker, but understand that if you're going to try and sell that outside of this market, it needs to be, first of all, it has to taste great, but it's probably going to have to look a certain way, and that's the sad truth of this story.
That's true. Actually, that's very true.
And it would need to, just to clarify, it would need to look
Light.
like
A little
what?
more pale pink. There were some darker pinks that I think easily could get away with, and there are so many people looking for alternatives from Côte de Provence, but in general, that light pink thing is just.
And there were a lot of rosés of Pinot Noir today that had that color,
Yep.
which were perfect for that style of wine.
Well, and also, luckily, it seems like you guys can get clear glass, because in France, clear glass is gone. You can't get it. So all these folks in Provence, for 2021, they're going to have to bottle the wines in green glass, which means you can't see it.
Which is sad because we all love that color.
Well, that's the thing. People want to be able to see
Yeah,
it.
it's very
But-
appealing,
That's
Clear
another
glass.
alluring fact of people buying things.
right?
Yeah.
Well, what do you taste with your eyes first?
Exactly.
Right?
Wonderful. Other overall impressions, something that you would just really love for our wineries to hear, or our sponsors, or our future guests. What would you like them to know about the competition wines that we haven't already talked about? I feel like we've done a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep on doing things that you believe in, you know?
Okay,
Keep on
that's
doing things you believe in and keep experimenting.
Yeah.
You know, it's really exciting to see what everyone is doing, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
Right.
You know, and again, I think what's happening here in Southern Oregon is going to influence what's happening in you know, in Willamette Valley, and again, it's going to be a conversation, I think, and I hope there will be even more, you know, conversation between the two and more synergies, so that, you know, people will then come to see Oregon wines are diverse, are high quality, are beautiful, but also fun, and lots of different types of opportunities for enjoyment. So, I mean,
Well, and the prices are good. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a combination of things like, you know, talking to people or just looking at production levels. There's still, you know, we have 8 rows of this or 7 rows of that. So they're clearly experimenting. But I like the fact that they're not charging the customer for their experiments.
Right.
You know, so they say, okay, we're going to make
Right.
like this Tinta Cow, but we'll charge $26 for it.
Right.
It's almost like they're breaking even, you know, and then figure out what's going on, as opposed to places where it's like, check out my 5-year-old vine Cabernet, it'll cost you $135, and you don't have to imagine where that's coming from. But yeah, I like you know, the experimenting thing. You talk about the cowboy aspect, that people here are willing to, you know, give something a shot. Not gonna be a huge thing, but they make 2 or 3 barrels of something and sell it from the tasting room or mailing list, and they're very open-minded, and let's see where it goes.
But also, I'd like to add, I don't know if I know there's some controversy with different wineries about how important competitions really are. And I learned not even so much just, again, about the region, and I've been here before, but back to what Virginia said earlier, the opportunity to find professionals that will also help you spread the word is incredible. And to have a competition like this that again was diverse, and we got to try wines from all over the place, and we're all just, I don't want to speak for everyone here, but really excited.
Yes.
oh yeah, you're speaking.
We're all going to go home and go, okay, how are we going to get this in? Where are we going to take this? So competitions like this were great, and you guys did a fabulous job.
Yes.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, it was definitely, we love to do it. So thank you again, all of you, so much for being here and for giving us your time. It's an honor to be with you, and an honor to have you try all of our wines. Thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. We really appreciate your support, and we're so excited to share all these wines with you at the Oregon Wine Experience and reveal all the medals that were awarded today. We were very pleased to see some of the products that came out of the evaluations this weekend. So stoked to share that with you. Thank you again to the Oregon Wine Competition presenting sponsor, Rogue Pacific Lumber, and to all the wineries who participated in the competition. And if you didn't this year, make sure you get in so that these guys can be excited about your wine. And don't forget to join us for the medal celebration on August 17th, starting at 6:30 p.m. This will be live streamed for all to enjoy if you won't be with us under the tent. Please be sure to visit OregonWineExperience.com for more information about this year's events. And we will see all of you in August.
Did you say stoked?
I said stoked. And this is going to be on YouTube, so we're stuck with it. I read that line that I was supposed to say it's going to be on YouTube, and my heart rate went through the roof. Like, oh my goodness, we're stuck now.
I guess I'm stoked too.
We're all stoked.
I think we're all stoked.
We're all stoked.
Cheers.
I love it. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
That's it.
All right.
All right.
This one's yours.
Thank you.
Really?